Music is everywhere. There's a soundtrack to every movie and TV show that we watch. Music is used at sporting events to get us hyped for the game. Music plays in the background when we're at a restaurant or when we're shopping at the mall. And even if we aren't hearing music that someone else is playing for us, most of us have a device in our pocket that we can pull out at any time and access music whenever and wherever we want. We're at a point in history where silence is rare and can even feel uncomfortable. When asked, 91% of Canadians say they listen to music. If we look specifically at teenagers, that number rises to 96%. On average, teens and millennials listen to 29 hours of music a week. That's over 4 hours of music a day. And if you subscribe to a streaming service such as Apple Music or Spotify, that number jumps to 37 hours a week. And music affects us in some pretty weird ways. That music that we hear in the store, it's not just because the store owner loves music like we do. We actually buy more stuff when music is playing. And if we listen to the right style and tempo of music while we're exercising, we perform better. And if we're eating at a restaurant and the restaurant turns up the music, we actually start to eat faster. But music also impacts us on a deeper level. I was speaking to a youth group in Dunnville. Last February, it was a snowy evening and about 15 youth braved the storm to gather in the church basement to hear me talk. Beforehand, I had asked the youth to send me some of the songs that they were listening to. And at the time, Lil Pump was quite popular. His song Gucci Gang was #1 on the Billboard charts. So I wasn't surprised when several of the youth suggested that we listen and discuss that song. As the chorus began to play, the faces of most of the youth lit up, and they began to sing along. But then the first verse hit, and their enthusiasm faded quickly, being replaced with looks of confusion, surprise, and even embarrassment. Even though some of these youth had heard this song dozens of times, listening to this song together was impacting them in a new and conflicting way. We're surrounded by music, yet it's so hard to see how it's actually shaping us. Whether we realize it or not, songs change us. They impact our thoughts, our emotions, and our behaviors. And over time, our faith and our identity, they develop from these same factors of what we're thinking, feeling, and doing. Now, scientists have been trying to figure out exactly how music affects us for a long time, so they've been doing a lot of research and experimenting on this. Here's just a couple of examples of what they've found. Let's imagine that you're actually part of this first experiment. You're asked to sit in a room and the researcher plays you a song in which the lyrics talk about helping another person. After the song is done playing, another person enters the room holding a bunch of pencils. As this person walks in front of you, they drop the pencils by accident. Wanting to be helpful, you bend down and help pick up some of the pencils. What you don't notice is that the researcher is behind you, counting how many pencils you actually helped to pick up. After repeating this experiment many times with other people, including people who just hear a random song, a song that does not talk about helping other people, the researchers begin to see a pattern. Participants like you who hear a song with helping lyrics pick up a lot more pencils than those who don't. Music is shaping your behavior to be more helpful. Now let's imagine that you're part of another experiment. It starts very similar with you sitting in a room and being asked to listen to a song. But this time the song has lyrics that talk about being mean towards someone else. After the song is done, the researcher comes in and gives you a bottle of hot sauce. They explain that there is a stranger in the next room, and even though that stranger doesn't like hot sauce, you need to give them some. So you pour a little bit of hot sauce into a cup and hand the bottle back to the researcher. The researcher thanks you and you're free to go. Again, after repeating this experiment with hundreds of people, researchers begin to notice another pattern. Participants who heard a song with lyrics that talked about being mean to others would give way more hot sauce to a stranger than those who just heard a random song. And these examples show the impacts of a song after just one listen. Imagine how over time, music has the ability to shape us significantly. I truly believe that particular songs can help us process our emotions well. They can help us understand other people and their experiences, and they can connect us with God better. But other songs also distort how we view others. They increase our aggression, perhaps our unhappiness, and even tempt us towards sinful behaviors. So what do we do? If we avoid music altogether, we miss out on so many of these positive effects as we're learning who we are and growing in our faith. But if we listen to certain songs, we may be shaping ourselves in unhealthy ways and becoming the type of person that we don't want to be. We need to learn how to evaluate and choose music that changes us for the better. We need to learn discernment. To start, we first need to understand what discernment means and then follow a simple process to develop it. Here's a definition that I've created to help us. Music discernment is the skill to understand the finer details of a song, including how it impacts us and others, so that we can wisely choose a healthy response to it. Let me break this definition down phrase by phrase for you. First, discernment is a skill, and just like other skills in life, we are not born with them, but we need to learn and develop them as we go. At first, it might be a little bit awkward as we're trying to discern music, but over time, we will feel a bit more empowered and comfortable in our ability to make wise choices. Second, music discernment is understanding the finer details of a song, which means that we're looking at more than just the lyrics. We're looking at all aspects of the song, including musical elements, its genre, the authors, and the context in which it was written. We also seek to gain awareness about how the song is impacting us. Music engages our emotions, and it's helpful for us to identify what we are feeling as we're hearing the song. And finally, music discernment is about responding creatively and actively to the song we hear. We need to evaluate what we know and how we're feeling and make a choice that will move us closer to who we want to be. Now, all people can learn and benefit from the skill of discernment, but for Christians, there's an added dimension to this discernment. We need to test whether the ideas and the emotions we're hearing in the song are truthful and helpful for us as we're trying to follow Jesus. Now, we don't try to judge the heart or the salvation status of the musicians who are creating this song. For example, we don't try to figure out whether Beyoncé is a Christian or not, or if you can be a Christian and be a fan of her music, because Jesus plainly teaches in Matthew 7, verses 1 and 2, "Do not judge others, and you will not be judged. For you will be treated as you treat others. The standard you are using in judging is the standard by which you will be judged." So we don't try to judge the heart of the artists, but we do engage in the ideas presented within each song by them. Paul talks in 2 Corinthians 10 verses 4 about using God's mighty weapons, not worldly weapons, to knock down the strongholds of human reasoning and to destroy false arguments. We must discern whether the ideas and the emotions we're hearing in the song align with Christ, or perhaps they're coming from a different source. Now that we have a better idea of what discernment is, we can explore a simple process that can get us quickly on track to developing this skill. And I think we can break it down into 3 steps. The first step is to learn the facts and the impacts. This is where we learn as much as we can about the song with a few intentional questions. Now, it'd be near impossible for us to fully research every song we hear, but there's 5 questions that I think will give us a deeper understanding of what we're hearing. And I'm confident that all of you can come up with answers to these questions without having to Google a single thing. The first question to ask is, what is the mood of the song? Perhaps before the song starts to play, you are feeling a bit sleepy and down, but as it goes on, you start to feel more excitement and joy. Or maybe a song starts you thinking about a past event, and you start to feel nostalgic or sad. It's helpful to know how a song makes you feel. The second question to ask is, what stands out to you about this song? Is there a particular bass drop, melody, or lyric that is repeating in your brain, even though the song is done playing? Chances are this part of the song is sticking with you for a reason, and it's helpful to notice and ask why that might be. The third question to ask is, why do you think the artist wrote the song? Now, artists are motivated to write music for a wide variety of reasons. These reasons could be to make money, become famous, share an idea, express their emotions, and sometimes even just to tell us about their past experiences, hoping that we will be encouraged that we're not alone if we're going through something similar. It's helpful to reflect on what the artist hopes for with their song. The fourth question to ask is, how are others around me experiencing this song? It's so easy just to get caught up in our own perspective, but we can learn a lot by observing others around us. Are there certain groups of people who are reacting differently to the song than I am? I often notice this in group discussions when, for example, the men in the group will have a very different perspective on the song than the women, and it's helpful for us to have that conversation between the genders. And the final question to ask is, how does the Bible talk about the theme of the song? Most songs have a theme or two running through them, and it's helpful to connect these themes to the biblical story. This doesn't mean doing an intensive biblical study, though you can do that if you want to. It just means asking whether there are any verses or stories from the Bible that this song reminds you of. And connections don't always have to be positive or in agreement. Seeing how a song disagrees with the biblical theme, or even how the Bible makes little mention of a topic that the song is mentioning, is valuable information in the discernment process. Now that we understand the song better through these 5 curious questions, the second step of discernment is looking at our options. The music industry is set up in a way to hide most of these options from us, as the default option they hope we see is just to consume. But we have so many options. This is where I find the research of Andy Crouch so helpful. He looked at how Christians have typically responded to culture and found that there are 4 main types of responses that we've had. And I think this can be a good framework for us as we start to look at what options are available to us. So when we hear a new song, one response we could have is to avoid it. Perhaps something that we've heard strikes us as untrue, unhealthy, or unhelpful, so we decide to move on and never listen to that song again. Yes, there may be times when we hear it in a public place and we don't have the option of avoiding it, but as much as it's within our control, we decide not to listen to it again. Another option we have is to hear a song and then choose to find a copy of it. This is where we hear a song with parts that we really like, but again, there are parts that we don't think are healthy for us. So we don't completely walk away from it, but we acknowledge the good parts by finding a new song that is inspired by those good parts, minus the bad parts. So if you hear a song with a great message, but it has a boring melody, it'd be looking for a song with a similar message, but better songwriting. Or if we hear a sick beat, but the song is mean towards another group of people, we may find a song that's in a similar style, but has a better message. This option seems to be the most misunderstood by Christians, as we often think that straight copying is just plain bad. And I'd agree. What we don't realize is that all of music is inspired by previous work. I once had a jazz piano teacher who told me that every chord progression we find in modern pop music was done by Johann Sebastian Bach hundreds of years ago. A great artist can take what's previously been done and reorganize it in new and creative ways. So I think this response can work for us, and it's a valuable option. We just need to find artists who are doing it well. A third option we have is to critique the song. This is where we believe there is something the song can teach us. There may be elements and ideas that we're unsure about, so we do listen with a level of caution, but we're curious as well, being open to other ways of looking at the world. We listen to the song actively to learn. And the fourth option we have is to consume the song. This is where we hear the song and we decide it's going to be a song that I'm going to listen to over and over again, and I'm going to do it with little active thought or even feeling. Like I mentioned before, we just need to be aware that this is the response the music industries hope we have. Now, Andy Crouch argues that none of these responses is the overall correct response for all of culture, but Christians must discern which choice is the correct one for each piece of culture. Each song we hear requires us to choose an appropriate response. And the final step in the discernment process is to evaluate the impact our listening choices are having on our life. Now, we may need some time after making our listening choice before we actually see some results, so this process might be helpful to do a couple weeks after you've made your choice. To start, we need to evaluate our actions. Have we actually followed through with our choice? Remember, the key part of discernment is actively choosing a response, so we should be able to see some sort of change in our behavior. Avoiding a song means that we're changing the dial or hitting skip on our playlists. Finding a copy involves doing some searching for new music. Critiquing a song involves thinking and possibly discussing the song with other people. Occasionally, we might also need to take a step back and see the bigger picture. Are my listening responses balanced? If you notice that most of your choices land in only one of the four options presented, then you've developed what Andy Crouch calls a habit. And this habit isn't a good one, because you've actually trained yourself to respond to music before you've even heard it. There isn't any room for you to be open to responding to music in different ways. So after evaluating our actions, then we need to evaluate its impact. Are my choices changing my life for the better? Perhaps initially there's a song that you decide to consume, but you begin to notice that your thoughts shift to jealousy and unhappiness every time you hear it. I actually had this happen to me with the song 24K Magic by Bruno Mars. I initially chose to consume it because I loved how he copied some of those early hip-hop sounds from the 80s, and he did it in such a new and creative way. But I started to notice that I would feel more unsatisfied about my life every time I heard the song, because it was of Bruno Mars telling me how good his life was. Even though I knew he was exaggerating, it still made me unhappy. So I now avoid that song because I want to feel gratitude, not jealousy. It's never too late to change your response. Yes, the discernment process of learning, choosing, and evaluating can be challenging at first. It takes some effort to walk through each step, but it's so worth it. We have the ability to shape our lives through the music we hear. We can develop a stronger understanding of who we are. We can learn empathy for those around us, and we can grow our faith in God. I just want to illustrate this with one final story before I end. I was invited back to a youth group in Hamilton. I had spoken there a couple years before, and I was curious to see how they were doing. For the second visit, several of the youth wanted to discuss the song Sick Boy by the Chainsmokers. As per our practice, we played the song with the lyrics on the screen. Afterwards, we walked through the now familiar process of asking those 5 curious questions and then choosing a healthy response. I was amazed at the ease in which these youth navigated these questions, and an extremely meaningful conversation came from it. Several of the youth identified a sad mood within the song. They felt the song represented their generation and some of the struggles they were facing with mental illness. Other youth could chime in with personal struggles. They bravely shared a desire for help from the older members of that church congregation. We could even start to brainstorm a bit, looking at what concrete actions these youth would see as supportive. Listening to the Chainsmokers with a discerning ear led these students to a place where they could process difficult emotions and discuss the challenging reality for their generation. When it came to understanding music, I didn't see surprise, confusion, or even embarrassment on the faces of these youth, but I saw something different. I saw awareness, a courageous vulnerability, and glimpses of hope that the music they now understood better could spark positive change in their lives. And I believe that as we become all more aware of the power of music, we can make choices that strengthen our identity and grow our faith in God. Thanks so much for listening to the short audio recording. I hope it's been helpful for you, and I look forward to connecting more with you to see if there's any questions I can answer, perhaps regarding what a presentation may look like for your group. My contact info again is available at micahvandyk.com. That's MicahVandijk.com. I hope you have a great day.